This is a video tutorial of one of my favorite books. It's called Mara, Daughter of the Nile. And this is a book that I loved so much as a kid that I almost became a criminal because of it. I almost stole it. I'm going to talk about that later. This is a story, it's set in ancient Egypt, and it's a spy thriller. It is, it is such a, oh, it's an amazing book. It's an amazing book. And it's an interesting book to use in the classroom because you can really talk about point of view. Because the author, Eloise Jarvis McGraw, she uses multiple points of view. It was published, I think, in 1952 or 1953. So there are going to be certain sensibilities that will be different. But I think some teachers, they view these kinds of challenges as talking points. These are things that you can discuss with the students reading the book in terms of how they would feel now. It's set in ancient Egypt, and the way I came across it was my older sister recommended to me. She loved it, and she said, "Oh, you got to read this book." And I thought, ancient Egypt, really? And I had never read historical fiction. I'd never really given it a chance. I had basically read through all of the mysteries and all the adventure books because when in the small town of Dundas, I kind of read through the whole collection in the public library. So I ran out of books to read, and she said, "Read this one, it's really good." And it took a while to get into. It really did. It took a while to get into because what Eloise Jarvis McGraw did, I mean, she writes this book through many different point of views. And some of them are even a little bit questionable. I'm not sure why artistically she did that. But it actually works in the whole. It works. And she actually doesn't start with Mara. She doesn't start with the title character. And she doesn't even start with Sheftu, who is like the hunky guy in the story. He's actually a lord in Hatshepsut's court. And it's set at the time of Hatshepsut, and it's really about the rebellion of Thutmose, her half-brother, against Hatshepsut. And I think some, in terms of sensibilities, some feminists might not like it because there is a line in the book where she talks about, oh, a woman is assuming to be pharaoh on the throne. Okay, so I think feminists would find that really galling. But really, it comes down to McGraw illustrates that Hatshepsut was not a responsible ruler. Because in the book, what she's trying to do is she's trying to first she gets this obelisk from the land of Punt, which is this huge granite pillar. You know, an obelisk is like it's like a pillar that's very tall with like a conical shape at the top. Well, kind of a pyramid shape at the top. The Washington Monument was based on the Egyptian obelisk. Okay, that's the same shape. And so she looks at it and she says, "Oh no, it's too dull. I want it covered in electrum." An electrum was actually an amalgam of gold and silver. Okay, so she's basically covering this huge rock pillar with gold and silver. And that's bankrupting the country. So that illustrates that she's not a good ruler because she's um, going after her own pride and stuff like that. So there's many different points of view in the story. There is a love story in it, and it's a really intense book. It is so intense, and the characters in the book, the male character Sheftu, oh my gosh, he's so strong, he's so charismatic. I think boys would really relate to him, and of course the girls would relate to Mara. And there's some, it's really good, like there's a romance in the book, but and in fact there in Mara, Daughter of the Nile was the first literature crush I ever had. I'm not sure if it was Sheftu or if it was Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre, but one of them was the first guy I really fell in love with in a book. And Sheftu was definitely up there. Like there was Mr. Rochester and there was Sheftu. Those are the two guys that I fell in love with in terms of a book. I really wish that they could have come to life. So, so the story is really, it's very fast paced. It's very intense. And it has larger issues involved too, because it starts out with Mara basically being this slave girl, and she becomes this double agent. It's like a spy thriller. She's spying both for Hatshepsut and against her. And a lot of the whole plot revolves on her. She becomes a key instrument in the whole rebellion that Sheftu is planning against Hatshepsut. And it's really, really intriguing. The way, like, I mean, kids reading the story would get an idea of what it really takes to overthrow a monarch, because Sheftu is very methodical. It's not just like getting people riled up. You actually have to plan things, and Sheftu's a little bit on the cynical side because he thinks any person can be bought. And what he does is he uses large bribes to convince a lot of the courtiers to go along with overthrowing Hatshepsut. So he's working on all of this. And Mara, at the beginning of the story, she's really in it for herself. She thinks, no, girl, I got to take care of myself. And there's a reason for that. She's a slave girl. She's got no one else to step up and take care of her. But over the course of the book, she changes. She actually changes. And she becomes a little bit more altruistic, and she starts to believe in a cause. There's so many things. There's so many things in this story, like, and so many different levels that you could have discussions about it in the classroom. And honestly, it's just a romping good read. Okay, I mean, there's a kiss in the book. Oh, it is like, ooh, it is like, oh, there's a kiss in the book, and yeah, it's just really, really good. And what happened was with this book, I mean, I growing up in Dundas, like I said in one of the other tutorials, I was really poor. And I basically read through the entire collection in the Dundas Public Library. And I started with mysteries. I went on to adventure books. And then here I was, this was the first historical fiction that I read. Growing up, I didn't know you could buy books. I thought the only place you could get books were in libraries. So I didn't actually know you could buy books. And what would happen was I loved Mara so much. I would take it out and I would keep it for 3 weeks, read it like 5 times, and then I'd have to take it back in and renew it. And I renewed it probably about 4 or 5 times until finally the librarian said, okay, you got to leave it in the library now. So I waited a month and I thought, okay, I want to take it out again. So she let me take it out again. And I was reading it at home and I loved it so much. And I thought, oh, I don't want to give this book back. So what I did was, I mean, this is kind of embarrassing, but what I did was I actually went to the librarian and I told her that I'd already returned it. And this was back in the time with card catalogs, and it wasn't as automated as it is now. And I said, no, no, I already returned it. I lied. And she said, are you sure? And I said, oh, yeah, yeah, I returned it. I returned it. And so she just marked it missing or something like that. And I kept it at home under my mattress for a whole month. Oh, and every time I read it, I felt so guilty. I felt, oh, I'm stealing, I'm stealing, I'm stealing. And I thought, oh, I'm such a bad Muslim. And so what I did was I couldn't stand it any longer. So I actually tucked it into my jacket and I went back to the library. And while the librarian wasn't looking, I put it back on the shelf. And then when I went back the next week to take it out again, it was gone. I think the librarian probably culled it because it was falling apart. Okay, it wasn't this book. It was a hardcover and it was like falling apart. The binding was kind of broken because it had been read so much and loved so much. So it was gone, and I thought, oh, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. And when I grew up, and I was actually in a bookstore. This is when I was working on becoming an author. I was at this. I was in this bookstore, and I was thinking, oh, all these books I could buy. I found Mara, Daughter of the Nile. There were 5 copies on the shelves. I bought all 5 copies. And the proof of how effective and beautiful this book is, I gave this book to a number of girls in my family. Like I had 5 copies. I kept a couple for me. I gave them out to different people. And one of them, I gave it to my daughter. Like she read it and she loved it too. And oh my gosh, she loved it. And then I gave it to one of my husband's nieces, who's an avid reader as well. And she absolutely loved it. In fact, she went on to read other Egyptian historical fiction. She said it just made her get into it so much. Now, in terms of the point of view, as a teacher, as an educator, how you can handle that, you can talk about the choices that Eloise Jarvis McGraw used. I mean, I think maybe she was following Shakespeare, or something, because if you notice a lot of the Shakespeare's plays, he does not start with the main characters. He actually often starts with like a minor character. In Romeo and Juliet, there's those two guys, I can't even remember, Mercutio, or I don't know, I can't remember. They're chatting at the beginning and everything. And in Hamlet, he starts with those guys who see the ghost. So he doesn't necessarily start with the title characters. And McGraw doesn't do that with Mara, Daughter of the Nile either. She starts with Nakong. And Nakong is like a riverboat sailing captain. And he's a captain that Sheftu recruits to help him in the rebellion. Now, the neat thing about it, if this is when you connect historical fiction with actual history. Because when I went down to the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, there's actually a fresco, like a frieze, or I can't remember if it's called a frieze or a fresco, like a scene where they took the actual hieroglyphics that were in Egypt and they copied them. They reproduced them, and it's on this whole side of the wall, and it's actually a fresco of the voyage to get the obelisk and these little punch trees, these trees from Punt that Hatshepsut actually did. So when I went to the ROM and I saw this on the wall, it was like, whoa, it was like such a connection. And it was like, oh, it was like amazing. And you can tell that McGraw actually went to Egypt and she did a lot of research on this book, because just the atmosphere of ancient Egypt is so pervasive in the book. It's like fantastic. Now, like I said, one of the problems I had with in terms of point of view, I mean, she uses multiple point of view, and that's something you can talk about with the students in terms of how effective each of the point of views she uses is. And one of the point of views that I thought was kind of questionable was when she used the point of view of the goddess Newt. And the goddess Newt, apparently she was like the night sky and stuff like that. And the night sky is watching these characters from the story scrambling about in the middle of the night. And she thinks it's like really curious. Like she's not that, she's kind of aloof and a thing. And personally, I thought when she included that chapter, it didn't quite work, because this story was so intense, and it was at such an intense moment, and then she introduces this far off character, and then maybe she was doing that to gain perspective. It's like in, The Emperor's New Groove. There's a scene where the camera pulls back from what's happening on the screen. It pulls back, and then you see the city in the clouds away, and you see this monkey, and it grabs this bug and it starts eating it, and what is it? Arthur Slade. He plays Cuzco the Emperor. He says, "What's with the monkey?" But basically, uh, I think Disney, the animators, did that to basically pull back and show the larger picture. That this story is happening within the context of a larger thing that's happening in the world, the world has no idea the little things that are happening in this moment in this little story. And I think maybe McGraw does the same thing with the scene with the goddess Newt. I'm not sure why she put it in. Personally, I found that it really slowed the story down, and I thought it was not a good place to slow the story down. Mind you, it picks up just as fast, very quickly, soon after that anyway, so it's a short chapter, but yeah, I thought that was questionable. The whole book, though, it would be the kind of book that really gets the kids into reading. Okay, like I said in one of my other tutorials, I think the tutorial I was talking about, the Blue Castle. Sometimes you have to wean students onto literature. And this, to me, definitely Mara, Daughter of the Nile it's literature. It goes beyond potboiler. It goes beyond romantic thing. It's deeper than that. It really is deeper than that, because it's really about learning to be a bit altruistic, think about beyond your own needs, and think of the needs of the larger society. That's really what it's about, because Sheftu is working towards what he thinks is what's good for the larger society. And he's very cynical. He thinks everybody can be bought. And Mara, she's she's just taking care of her own hide. She thinks that, nobody else is going to take care of me. I got to take care of myself, and it's true. She's really on her own. So It's really, really a fantastic story. It's one of those comfort reads that I go back to over and over again, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you will check out the other tutorials and my other recommendations. I will include some resources in the links. Thank you for listening.